Welcome back to another exhilarating episode of Traveling Through the 80s with the 80s Kids. I'm your host, as always, Rich Oliver. And with me to my left always is Crazy Kyle Lintz.
Hey ho, I'm ready to go.
And down there in the cellar is Dangerous Don Brown.
How come he's to the left and I'm down in the cellar?
I don't even know if he
that's
left
a good,
now.
that's a good question.
I used to get locked in the attic. That's where I was, but I'll take
Right,
the
right.
left, the right, the top,
Wait,
the bottom.
what was
Here I
that? Was a rubric in the
Yeah.
cellar?
Yeah.
I feel like, that's what
Exactly.
in the basement. But I'm here. I am here.
We're here. We're ready.
Good.
Awesome.
And we're back this week doing another interview, not a full show. But Kyle, you want to explain what we're doing this week?
Absolutely. Today we got a special guest. Really excited. Someone who has worked in the industry for a long time and has not only touched on many of the properties that we grew up with, but properties outside of our youth. I mean, some of through the 90s into the early 2000s, even as far back into the 60s. So this is someone that's actually seen the industry for quite some time. And I am pleased to present and welcome to the show writer extraordinaire Rowby Goren. Thank you so much for joining.
Yeah, welcome.
Well, I'm happy to be here, and I really go back even earlier. I mean, my family was the first family in the neighborhood to have a television set.
Oh, excellent.
So that was, nobody else did. So I used to, right away I gravitated towards, television is what I was interested in as a kid, and I would watch Milton Berle, Sid Caesar, but they were past my bedtime hours, so I used to watch them through the crack in the door where the hinge and the door was. And years later, when I worked with Sid Caesar, which was an amazing experience, and met Milton Berle, I told them how I used to watch them through a crack in the door, and they were both amused.
Nice.
Oh, that's
so.
Where'd you get started? Like what?
Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead. You go ahead.
No, go ahead.
Oh, I was just saying, like, so now here you are as a young kid. You've been introduced to television. What inspired you to get involved in television? What got you into writing for TV?
Well, initially, I wanted to. When I would see Milton Berle and Sid Caesar, I wanted to be on TV. I wanted to be a TV star. And I remember in school one day, I was with some friend of mine. We were probably 10 years old, and I said, "Well, I want to be a TV star." And I said, "You want to be one too?" He says, "No." And I couldn't believe it, why everybody didn't want to be a TV star.
Right.
I was a very naive little kid. But it really all started with my father. My father was not a jokester, but he would have friends over and he would talk to them just about whatever it was. And he would crack some jokes that were shocking. It was almost like it was written. I mean, I was startled by he wasn't doing it all the time, but when he did it, it was just perfect, like it was planned almost. And that obviously affected me. So when I would go to school and I wanted to, get friends and all that, I lived in different neighborhoods. We moved a little bit more than most kids. And I'd find myself in a new school. I'd use very, primitive forms of comedy to make friends. So that was really my start.
What was it, like a shtick? You like shtick or something?
I mean, I like to think I wasn't annoying, but it was funny enough for the kids to laugh.
Yeah.
And so that's how I started in comedy. And comedy is really always been my interest, although I have written other kinds of shows. So I have some notes here. So the interview could be whatever you want, but
Sure.
My story would be about myself as a comedy writer, but also someone who was always very interested in the technology. I was fascinated by how things worked on television. I'll tell you a little bit about that.
Great.
And but first, a little bit about what a comedy writer is. My philosophy is this, and I don't want to be negative about people who write drama, but in theory, anybody can write drama. Now, of course, that's insulting people who write drama, but comedy takes a skill beyond all that.
Right.
You have to make you have to get laughter from an audience. Now, someone could watch a dramatic film and sit through it, and it's okay, it's a story. But if you go to a comedy movie or a television show and they don't laugh, the writer's in trouble. So
That's true.
we're a different kind of animal, the people who write comedy. Although in my career, I have written some things that were dramatic, but not much. Usually I was hired, no matter what kind of a show I worked on, for my comedy, because I was good at it.
And you've seen
I was
it.
an expert at.
You've seen it evolve quite a bit over the years too, over the decades, like how it's changed here and there, I mean.
Well, it did. When I was writing on Laughing, we were guaranteed 26 shows a year. And now I think, it's like 6 shows if you're lucky.
Yeah.
So it's really,
right.
And especially when you're on a hit show like Laughing was, I always knew I was coming back. So in the summer, I could do whatever I want, and I was coming back. So it was a really great experience for me. I kind of feel sorry for the writers who are dealing with these short orders that they're doing now. So I would, besides watching television, I would occasionally go to a television show here in Los Angeles. The earliest television show I remember I went to was Andy's Gang, Froggy the Gremlin. It was at NBC, Sunset and Vine. And I don't know anything about what went on in the show. I remember some kind of a commercial, and I remember seeing Froggy on stage. That's all I remember about it. And that was my first.
Was that like a kids show?
in-person-
Was that like a kids
Oh, yes.
program? Okay.
Oh, it was
Sounded like it. That's what I was making sure.
sort of infamous. If you Google it, it's pretty bizarre.
Yeah.
Some old-time comedians on it, like Billy Gilbert, who was wonderful on the Laurel and Hardy films, and at Hal Roach. He was wonderful.
Oh, yeah.
By the time he was doing Froggy Gremlin, I think he was doing it just for a gig, but it was always very funny. He would try to make a speech, and this frog would come up and confuse him much more than that. So you go to YouTube and look at Froggy Gremlin.
Definitely.
And so that was one. And then there was a lot of local shows, of course, in those days in Los Angeles. There was one show called Peanut Circus, and I wrote in as a kid, of course, and I wanted they write in for tickets, and I did. And they had contests for the best clown. Now, let me see if I can do this properly. I'll show you the picture from Peanut Circus. I got to sort of navigate. Where's Peanut Circus? Where are you? Let me go to the right folder. This is, I didn't plan this as well as I should have.
It's okay.
Here we go.
We don't ever plan anything.
I just like.
I'm going to share that now. Let me see if I can do it now. Show selected. Yeah, okay. So there I am. I'm on the very left. I'm number 2. Do you see that?
Oh, hold on. Let me see. It's not popping up here. Let's see. Huh.
You know,
shared.
Yeah, it didn't pop up. Let's see here. Yeah,
If it's not shared, then it's not shared.
That's okay.
okay. But what I think is interesting is like where you grew up in California, you had that option to go to live tapings, where we grew up in upstate New York. That would only be something we could ever do if we went on vacation to a place like LA or New York where they were filming live shows. I mean, it's almost like you were going to like a movie as a kid or something, but you're going to actually like a live filming of a show. It's
well, Howdy Doody was in New York most of the time. And so that was a New York show, and you had no excuse not to go there. The show was over with by the time you reached that age. And so I saw Andy's Gang.
Sure.
I guess I won't show the pictures because it's not sharing properly.
That's okay.
Share. I don't know.
It seems like it wants to. I'm getting a thing here. Let me see. It just seems like it's I'm getting just a little issue here with
more. I mean, I am allowed to share, right?
Yes. Yes, you should be able to. It should go through. Just that.
So all I do is I click on share and I
Yep.
go to photos,
Yep, and then you should be able to click on the
Um,
share option. Let me see.
photos, and then I'm getting into the right album, all albums, and I go to Rowby's podcast, and there's the pictures.
Make sure if you
And-
double click it, that
and-
usually
and-
helps too.
Okay, so let me see if I can get the Peanut Circus. Show selected. Okay. Oh, then I click on. You see it now?
Nope, still not popping
No,
up.
did you?
Yeah.
See it.
It's okay.
I'm sure it's great.
Oh, absolutely.
It is. Oh,
Without
it
a
is.
doubt.
It's wonderful.
Without a doubt.
So yeah. So anyway, so I will forget the pictures, and let me get out of that. So, but yes, there was tons of local shows here in Los Angeles, and then as I got older, again, I was always interested in comedy. So Soupy Sales left Detroit and came to Los Angeles and did his show, and friends of mine, we started the Soupy Sales fan club, and we were able to get into the studio for the Los Angeles. So we had a whole fan club, lifetime membership. Little did I know,
Oh, awesome.
our members
Wow.
are
Lifetime
AARP.
membership. Holy cow, very nice.
Yeah.
And it's funny, my girlfriend, the girl in it, her mother hated me, and she thought I was getting her into something really stupid until she started seeing envelopes come in with dollar bills in it.
Oh,
With so she changed her mind for a while about being
So
like,
how-
Quick.
until the
Yeah.
how
day
many how many members did you get in that club? So if it's something you formed.
probably 300 or 400 at
Wow.
that time.
Holy cow. Well, back
Wow.
then, I'm sure, yeah, he was very
was-
popular. Yeah.
He was, and if we were, and then I, stopped being president anymore. I was doing other things, including
Right.
getting into TV. But it went on even after I was
Oh, no
unofficially
kidding.
president. But we would go to the tapings and live productions. He would tape, I think, twice a week, and they'd do a whole week's worth of shows then. And it was a tiny little studio. One side was Soupy, the other side was the news guy. And as soon as Soupy was finished, the cameras would turn around, and after the commercial, it would be Baxter Ward's news. And he was a very serious guy, so he started the news while they're cleaning up all the custard pies on the other side of the set.
Nice.
So that was, again, behind the scenes. I was always interested in that. And then as I got older, I was always in plays and things like that. But again, it was always comedy. Comedy was what I was interested in. And years later, when I went to a high school reunion, they said, we always thought you would get into show business, but I was really very lucky. So I got a job at the County of Los Angeles divorce court, the marriage counseling division. So I suggest anybody who wants to become a comedy writer on television, go to get a civil service job at the divorce court. That led directly to my comedy writing career.
Step one.
So I have this job. I'm about really 18 or 19 years old, right out of school, and I turned on the TV one Monday night, and it's Laugh-In. Now, before that, I was trying to write sitcom scripts.
So you're already
with sitcoms.
You're already working in trying to be a working writer at this point.
I was.
Okay.
When I was 18, I started writing scripts for my favorite shows, which was The Munsters, Green Acres,
Nice.
and believe it or not, My Mother the Car, which is a very misunderstood show. They thought it was horrific, but it was really a spoof on all the ridiculous shows like The Flying Nun of its day. So, but today it's looked at as a, who could think of such a dreadful thing? So, but none of them, I couldn't get in with any of them except for Green Acres. Dick Chevrolet read my script. He was the writer, one of the writers, producers of Green Acres, and he called me in. And he said, CBS wants us to do another show, another pilot, and if we do it, if it sells, we need somebody else to help write our scripts, and you could do it. Turned out they didn't sell the show, and that opportunity went away. So my interest was more in sitcom writing, and not in variety show writing. But so again, we skipped to about 9 months later, and so I see Laugh-In. I had no contacts, really. Nobody in show business was in my family, so but someone said I should put together my best jokes and send them in. So on the way to work at the courthouse, I took the bus, and I would write jokes on a yellow tablet, and I would always hide it from people. I didn't want people to see what I was writing, so I always had the top part covered because I didn't want anybody to know what I was into. So I wrote and wrote and wrote. On the way to the bus, when I got to work, I'd type it up during my breaks, and during my lunch, I wrote some more. And then I got my 10 best jokes, and I still have that notebook that I typed.
Oh,
it up,
no
and
kidding.
I still have it.
That's awesome.
I sent them in on 3x5 cards because I thought that's what you're supposed to do, to George Schlatter, the executive producer of Laugh-In. And the very next day, I got a phone call from George. So I'm answering the phone at the marriage counseling department, and I say, "Conciliation court, may I help you?" And sitting across from me are all these failed marriages, husbands and wives, and all this. And I said, "This is George Schlatter." And I immediately said, "Just a minute." I put him on hold, because I couldn't talk about this stuff in front of failed marriages. I have a pretty loud voice, and they didn't hear me. So I went to another office.
Considerate of you.
Yeah, but he thought I was putting him on. I was very naive about everything in those days, and I really was being very honest. I couldn't talk there, So he thought, my God, he was the biggest comedy producer in Hollywood at that point. And he thought that this kid has some nerve. So I answered the phone in the other office, and we talked, and he says, "Well, can you come and meet with us?" I said, "Sure," And he said, "Well, what would be a good day? How about tomorrow?" I said, "Well, I knew all the bus schedules. I knew where his office was as well. I could take the 81 bus, and I could be there at 2:49. So he thought I was putting him on with the bus. When he started telling the story, when George is at conventions, and by the way, he has a new book out, George Schlatter. Whenever I'm there with him, and he would tell these very funny stories about how he discovered me. He said I was so young that my mother had to drive me to work every day. And of course, and the last time he told it was I was 6 years old. He started when I was, so he kept changing the story. So I meet with him and Dan Rowan, and they say, "Who wrote it?" George says, "Who wrote this stuff? You have a funny sister?" "No, she's not funny at all." And but they offered me to be on Laugh-In, and I said, "Do you want to do it?" I said, "Sure." But the interesting thing was Dan Rowan. Dan had been, and George too, has been through the hell of entertainment business. And here I had a real nice civil service job, and he said this to me, "Are you sure you want to do this? You have a civil service job, you're going to have a retirement and all that." Of course, I didn't even know what retirement was at that age.
Right.
But so, "You sure you really want to do this?" I said, "Yeah." And so I have to always respect Dan for not, because on camera and writers can have a pretty lumpy career. Right. I was lucky. I always worked on after Laugh-In. So there I was on Laugh-In as a writer.
How old were you at this point?
I was 76. No, I was.
Well, you look great.
19 or 20.
Oh, wow.
19 going on 20.
Okay, yeah, you're really young then.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's awesome, right?
Yeah, that's amazing.
Well, it really was. If I could show you a picture, I have a picture of me and the other writers. I look like I'm 13 years old in this one picture.
Now, how long had Laugh-In been on at this point when you finally got into that?
It was the second year. I decided I wanted to do it, and then the second year is when.
Oh, nice.
I sent the pictures in. The jokes in. I'm sure it was during the first year, or maybe it was the beginning of the second. And because I was trying other. I don't know why I waited so long. So now I'm a little confused about it. But
It's okay.
But it certainly was by the second year,
Mhm.
and I used to have fantasies that I would be in the courthouse, and all of a sudden the cast of Laughing would come in and take me away. Well, this is pretty about what happened.
Yeah.
That's
Here I
awesome.
am with all
Wow.
these. All the comedy writers, or certainly many of the comedy writers in Hollywood, including William Morris agent clients, wanted to write on that show.
Mm.
And here, this, nothing. Here I am, and
This
I have
little
pictures of
kid.
me with the other writers that I can't show you. But it was an amazing experience. And while I was
Absolutely.
there, I was always interested, as I said, the technology. And when I would be at NBC, headed for the studio, I'd hear the upstairs editing facilities where they were editing the videotape, and I would hear these men and women automated voices saying 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and I'm sure you're familiar with that editing system. It was how they would get their guidance for where to cut the tapes,
Mhm.
or where
Right.
to,
Yeah.
or at least overdub the tapes.
Right.
So downstairs is where we had 4 editors who were editing the kinescopes, because that's what they would edit, the kinescopes of the master tapes, and get it down to time, and then perfect timing, and then they would send it over to the suite, the audio facility, which was Glen at the time, and that's where we would add the laughs. We had the laugh track guy there. Douglas was the guy who did our laugh track. He did tons of shows, and then we do the mix. When I didn't go too often, but both times Dan Rowan was there. He, for whatever reason, would go there and supervise the mix. Whether he always did it, I don't know. Then they send it back to the 4 editors and 2 editors at a time who work on a show, and they would confirm that to the 2-inch tape, where they physically cut it with razor blades and microscopes, using the fluid and all that. And all that
Right, which is
fascinated me.
crazy.
I mean, what a process.
Yeah, absolutely.
It really wasn't possible to do that in those days. There were about 300 edits, but Art Schneider, who perhaps you guys have heard of, perfected a way to do it this way, with the razor blades and all of that. If it wasn't for a lot of people, including Art Schneider, we couldn't have done the show that way, because
Right.
I mean, these are very short edits.
Right.
And if you didn't get it right, I think they worked on the dub, but still, it was not a good thing to have the picture roll. They'd have to go back and whatever they had to do. But they did it right, and they had a very short time to finish it, and then satellite it to New York, often the day of the show, and it got on the air in the breath of time.
I guess just because looking back at those older shows with the old videotape and everything, and I was so young seeing a lot of like reruns of that stuff, it always felt like that was live. Like it wasn't taped.
Agreed.
It felt like it was happening right then,
Yeah, agreed. That's how I felt
And
too.
it really did. And if you were in the studio, it was the electricity was all over the place. The comedic electricity. It was, not too many people are still around who were in that studio, but it was electric experience in there. There were movie stars coming in, to do their cameos, and it was really exciting place to be. And I've been on many other shows where we had a wonderful family and but nothing was like Laughing.
It's left quite a lasting
experience.
impression too, because I mean, people still know Laughing, even
I mean,
younger kids still know what it is.
Well, they do and they don't. So there's a bakery around where I live called Bellwood Bakery, and they knew. I found out I was a writer. What did you write? I said Laughing, and they were totally, laughing. When I said
Depends
I
on your
wrote
audience,
Ninja
yeah.
Turtles,
Right.
When I said I wrote Ninja Turtles and He-Man and some of these other shows, they
Right.
said, "Wow!" So I'm a big hero,
Right.
not for my so-called live stuff, but for my animation in those cases.
Yeah.
And So it was kind of funny. Some people remember it vividly, especially if they saw the Nickelodeon version, which was a cut down version, and it lost of its
Right.
teeth in that cut down version because
Right.
they cut out all the topical stuff and all
Mhm.
that.
Yeah.
So so later on when I got into doing e-commerce, I'll get into that later. The people who made it were the decision makers are often the kids when I was writing my cartoons. Is, wow, you wrote that, you got the deal, you know. But it was
Mm.
it was really funny that. But when I have gone to some of these laughing events, I will run into some young people. And one guy met me in the parking lot and said he wanted my autograph. I said, well, my God, you're like 18 years old. What do you know about laughing? But he was a fan.
Mhm.
And so it's funny. And it truly was a groundbreaker. Laughing was listed by the Writers Guild as one of the 100 most best written comedy shows. But a lot of people don't remember it. But I remember I was at a party with a friend of mine, and a guy came over while we were writing Laugh, and he says, you know, he was a former Laughing writer, and he said, you know, I'm starting a new show in New York. It's going to be live on Saturday Night Live.
Yeah.
And would you guys like to write it? We thought to ourselves, yeah, sure. You know, that's not going to last. And
Right, I know.
and of course, he's still doing that show that wasn't going to last. And I remember when Hee Haw came on, you know, we said, boy, that's a ripoff. That's never going to last. And Hee Haw went on forever. And they started using computers to organize and their shows and do it very efficiently, even into the editing section of their show. So, again, the technology always interested me. And also, I mean, I don't know what you guys want to talk about, but
I'm loving it. I just want to listen to you. I just want to listen to you tell this stuff. Yeah.
Well, now, so you enjoyed sitcom writing. So, you know, what led you now that say Laugh-In has moved on, you know, what did you move to after Laugh-In? What was like one of the first sitcoms you did following Laugh-In?
I think I did Tony, Orlando, and Don of all things.
Okay. Yep. All right.
And I also wrote for Hollywood Squares.
Yeah.
And the good news,
Squares
on Hollywood Squares is that I got an Emmy for it. And the bad news, it was because it was bad news that it was for Hollywood Squares. It really wasn't the tapings were fun and they treated the writers really nice, but it just wasn't a fun job for me. So I stayed on it for a while. So I wrote all kinds of shows. I wrote game shows. I wrote sitcoms, Three's Company.
But how are you writing the game shows? I don't understand. Are you? So I always thought those people were doing it off the cuff. I like on Hollywood Squares.
Well, in the case of Hollywood Squares, Peter Marshall had a stack of cards in front on his podium, and they were lined up like squares. Paul Lynch was in the middle, and the other ones were there. So the square celebrities, they didn't know what the question was, but they were given their bluff answers for that question. They knew the first time they're called, they had a bluff answer for that. In the case of Paul Lynch, however, he had his bluff answer, but he also had his gag. And the gag made no sense to him until the question was called out. So if you watch him closely, he was laughing at the joke as much as the audience because it made no sense to him until he read it. And he never really gave credit to the writers, and I guess that's how some people are. But he never said, whereas others do give credit for the writers like Lucy and people like that. But he was he gave great deliveries. But whenever I see on the internet, boy, there's some great lines from Paul Lynch, I'll sometimes jump in and say, no, they were from writers. And other game shows.
That's mine.
Like me, yeah.
I did that.
I wrote that.
And then Heater Quigley, who produced Hollywood Squares, they had other game shows, and they had me write some of those just so to find a way to make it funny.
Mhm.
So I can't remember specifically what I would write, but maybe it was a multiple choice. And the third choice would be an obvious gag. So it made the Wink Martindale, or whoever was delivering the lines, or Alex Trebek, by the way, he was one of our hosts on one of the shows.
Neat.
He would get a laugh out of the third. You know, was it this, that, or a piece of salami, or whatever the third one option was. And then I got a call from there was a show called Joker's Wild. Have you ever heard of
Oh
it?
yeah,
Oh,
yeah,
yes.
yeah.
Yep.
Sure.
Love it.
Well,
Classic game show. Yeah.
Mhm.
yeah, and that was the same guy that did, you know, the quiz scandal. It was good old what's his name? My God, how can I forgot his name? But he was a very interesting guy. And I told him when I met him that what I saw in the quiz show scandal movie, 21, was really ridiculous. I said there was no reason for that to be subjected to that. It was just show business, and everybody was doing it. In fact, so was Hollywood Squares. We had a very fine print on the credits, as small as possible, where it says that they may have been given bluff answers and other things. But what we didn't say was, you know, was that where they were given the gags too. And in some cases, you actually were given the answer. In the case of Cliff Arquette, Charlie Weaver, who was a Civil War expert. As he got older, he couldn't do it anymore. So we act when the NBC censors would leave his dressing room after he was given the bluff answers, they would give him the actual answers for the questions, which was definitely against the law. I mean, at least against their rules. So
yeah, it kind of defeats the purpose of the game show.
Right.
Yeah.
And then I wrote other stuff too. I mean, I wrote usually it was comedy, but at a certain point, I got a call from my agent and said they're looking for writers for Fat Albert.
Oh wow.
Cartoon.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And would you want to go in and meet with them? And I said, no, I don't know how to write cartoons. And I certainly don't know how to write that peculiar language that those characters are using. I didn't think it was real. It was sort of a
How Badooby
exactly
and all that stuff.
Yeah. What was that? Mushmouth.
yeah, all of that stuff.
Yeah.
But I went in and they were looking again for comedy. They had a lot of, usually in the cartoon days when I was doing that, writers who were just getting started would be writing that, and they most likely they were not comedy writers. They would write stuff. So they liked the idea of me being on that, writing on that show to make it funnier. After all, it was Bill Cosby's show.
Yeah. Was that with Lou Scheimer?
So yeah, Lou Scheimer. You know, it was such a difference going into, so they had hired me because they liked my first script. And it was so funny working in animation because it was controlled by the animation union, and the people that had the most expensive cars in the parking lot were the ink and paint department.
No kidding.
Because they were paid by the hour. So I had to fill out timesheets every day, which I thought, my God, we never did this in live, you know, the other thing. But I was good natured about it. I said, all right, fine, you know, I'll do the timesheet. But it was very odd. When I would finish a script, Art Nadell, who was in charge of the writers, said, well, do the next one. Like I was like 2 hours left of the day. Give me a break, you know. I just turned this script in, and also. So I decided to kind of get back. I did what I had to do, but we did have, by the union rules, I think 20-minute breaks in the morning and the afternoon. So I would take naps during those periods, and they'd come into my office, and my legs were sticking up from under my desk. And but it was a wonderful experience because besides writers like me, they had the storyboard artists there who were just amazing. They really were amazing for that. For filmation, they were, and they loved my scripts because while I thought I couldn't write comedy, cartoons, I actually did like it because I could call the camera shots. when you're writing a sitcom, especially in those days,
Mhm.
if you just write the dialogue. If you put it in camera shots and movements and things like that, you get chewed out by the director, and I had been. So
No kidding.
I really like calling the shots, wide shot, medium, and all of that. And they like getting my scripts because I quickly learned the method of doing it. I mean, I could have been a director from what I learned from writing
Yeah.
cartoons.
Yeah, right.
And we did try to get into the union. The Writers Guild wanted us to be in the union. We went to the NLRB and we won the case. And then when it was appealed by the animation studios, they said, no, the writing is really done by the storyboard artists. And, years ago it was, but we were writing the same kind of scripts for the cartoons. So we won it. And then Ronald Reagan's Washington, D.C., NLRB, or am I doing, is that the football thing? Anyway, they reversed it. So I'm no big fan of Ronald Reagan. So that was that. So while I didn't get residuals except from France, as any show that's shown in France for cartoons, they say, I don't care whether you're under contract or not, the writers are going to make some money.
Nice.
For residuals. So I get it from that. It wasn't much, but it was sort of nice that some country respected the creative person. So
absolutely.
With this Writers Guild strike that's going on now, if it wasn't for the Writers Guild, there wouldn't be
anything.
No health insurance or anything.
Right.
For the
You couldn't.
And my
You couldn't support yourself.
Which I never thought I would ever thought about. But there it was, a pension because of the Writers Guild. So. Striking is very important. We would spend a couple of weeks writing a script. The voice actors would come in. They'd spend maybe a half hour recording it, and they would get residuals, and we wouldn't.
Oh my God!
Right? Yeah.
Because
all that effort you put into
they
it.
They were union. So, but the other thing that was so wonderful about my entire career was meeting some of the people like. Famous writers from the past. When I was writing Tony Orlando, the head writers were the two of the writers from the Jack Benny show, and I was a big fan of Jack Benny.
Wow!
So they were the guys who were, made the main writers and guided us through those scripts. And then later on, I got on a show called Mr. T and Tina, which is considered one of the biggest flops on television. But we never know what show's going to be a flop or not.
Right.
Yeah. We always have that. We're childlike. We always try to do our best. But anyway, it was produced by Madeline Q Davis and her partner. Bob Carroll Jr., and they were the writers of I Love Lucy, of course.
Okay.
Right.
That's pretty awesome.
I was able to, it really was, it was like, when I was a kid, I used to watch the I Love Lucy show, of course, and I would always read the screen credits at the end as if I was the announcer. I don't know why I did that. And I would always say their names as a kid.
Yeah.
And so there I was working with them. I also met Mark Daniels, who directed the pilot of I Love Lucy. I have a picture of him and me too, that I'm not showing you. And we really got along. So he was one of our directors on the Alice show. That's what the show was that they were involved with. And Bill Asher, who did Bewitched, he was married to the star of Bewitched. So I met all these wonderful, really talented people, including David Panich, John Laffin, Mark London, who come from years and years of experience of being writers. And so there I am, this is my career, going. And I'm writing so much animation. It was like writing pulp fiction. Even though I was a really good writer and I was always hired, looking back, in many ways, my animation writing was the best stuff I did in some ways, because I was writing it one after another like a pulp writer, and very much in demand. And it was interesting experience, especially when cartoons, who I was only writing for a weekly paycheck, no residuals, became so popular. I've been to conventions, He-Man Ninja Turtle conventions,
Mm-hmm.
and one father brought his son to the desk. Most people ignore the writers; they want to see the artists, but there were those who understand there are writers behind this whole thing. And they came to me and they said, "This is the guy that wrote your favorite He-Man." It was an episode called "The Greatest Show on Eternia," and
Yes.
He-Man purists hate that show.
I
But
love that
some
one. That's
do.
where Beastman has the human face, and
Well, so when I finished doing Fat Albert,
I love it.
figured that's the end of that. We finished. I did the last Fat Albert. I said, "Well, goodbye, everybody." I said, "No, we want you to stay. We want you to write He-Man." I would see his pictures on the wall. I had no idea who he was, and I thought it was rather odd to have such a muscle-bound guy in this studio. I didn't know what it was. He was earning on for a year, so he wanted me to write He-Man because he wanted some comedy into that, So I stayed on. I wrote He-Man, and one of the episodes, I wrote 3 of them, and one of them was the okay one. So what I did was they gave me the Bible of He-Man, and over the weekend I had and some scripts, and it was a thick Bible that made no sense to me. I had to come up with story ideas the next week. So what I did was I put He-Man was in my mind was Fat Albert with muscles, Mushmouth was Orko, and I just changed. And I put, I think one of them was one of the other characters in a dress, because none of it made sense to me. Man at War, is that a name, And so that's how I got away with that. And then finally, I was hired away by CBS to be the story editor of the Berenstain Bears.
Mm-hmm. A long-running show.
Oh, yeah. And in that case, I got a phone call from the story editor that Bernstein's were going to pull the show from CBS because they were getting the first scripts and they hated them. He says, can you do one? I don't know why they asked me, but they did. And I wrote a script, and they were so impressed they flew from their farm from Pennsylvania to meet me. And it was even more weird. They weren't in a plane. They literally flapped their arms and arrived in Hollywood. But they were really impressed with me, and I got along with them so well. And so there was that.
That's awesome.
So it's all these. It was really a oddball career I had. And I even was in charge of promos at CBS Local News, when Connie Chung was a celebrity there. I was putting together promos on 3/4-inch tapes. I had like 30 minutes to get the footage and get them to the editor, and we would just do it somehow in 30 minutes. And Connie would get a big laugh out of me carrying all these 3/4-inch tapes into the studio. I mean, that was my job, but she thought it was funny.
So I mean, you've run the gamut of just about every type of writing.
I was going to say,
it's
amazing that you have been in this industry since you were 19 years old.
Yeah.
It really is. And now I'm 20. No,
Right,
I'm older than that. Now this green screen I have behind me sort of brings out my wrinkles, but so far I'm okay.
Yeah.
And along the way, I did public access for writers and how to use computers to write scripts. And I have a videotape somewhere. I know where it is. It's how I was explaining. People came in and were explaining Microsoft Word and this new gadget called a mouse. That's how far back that goes.
Wow.
But I ended up teaching some famous people how to use a computer to write their scripts. Oh, and they introduced Microsoft Word on that event. We were using some CPM program to write scripts in those days. So I became sort of well known as a good person to learn how to write scripts with. So I taught Stuart Schwartz, who did the Gilligan's Island and Brady Bunch. I taught him how to use a computer.
Yeah.
And other people. And then one day I got a call from somebody who said he needs to learn too. He heard about me. So I went to his house in Bel Air, not a fancy house. I go into his living room, and on the wall are these posters, Singing in the Rain, all these famous musicals. It was Stanley Donen, and I really had no idea who he was. But I caught on pretty quickly because he was there, and he was, of course, the co-director or whatever his co-credit was, and I was just shocked, that I would be teaching him how to use a computer.
It's crazy.
In his later years. So I've had a fascinating career in the entertainment business. But finally, as I said at the beginning of this thing, being a comedy writer, very rewarding. When I'm outside and I look at people talking, within 5 minutes, like friends, you'll see one of them laugh or one of them smile. They might be very serious, but if you keep an eye on the go to Starbucks or something, or a group of people, at some point they're going to smile or even laugh. So it shows you how important comedy is. So, but still, it was a lot of work, and finally I told my agent I don't want to do it anymore. I because of my computer interest, I built some websites for people using some early technology in those days, and I was enjoying it. I mean, people would say, "You mean you gave up show business to build the websites?" And I said, "Yeah." And finally, I got a phone call from my agent. Says, there's a cartoon. They really want you to write. I don't want to do it anymore. I've had enough of it. I was always good at doing things for other people. I said, I just don't want to do it anymore. But I did one more for the guy that was the producer of Alf.
Neat.
That show. There was a cartoon version of something. I don't remember.
That's awesome.
So I
You're
got
still wanted even after those years.
Yeah, it was. So I met all these diverse things, from game shows to laughing and sitcoms and all kinds of stuff. And,
I mean, I love the writing that you did on Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventures, the animated series. It was one of my favorites from that time. I thought that was
well, that was, of course, the Bill and Ted cartoon.
Yes.
Yeah. So that's another thing. You just never know what show is going to be a hit, even in the world of cartoons. I would look at people would be, 30 years later, were reviewing one of my cartoon shows. They say, "Boy, what a piece of crap! He took jokes from shows that were aired earlier. Little did they know these shows were aired out of order, and they were stealing jokes from me."
Right.
Yeah.
So it was. And then in the case of He-Man. A guy wrote a book. A good friend of mine became a good friend. He was saying, that the worst script of all, was Greatest Show on Eternia. But he did say in his review that he did laugh, and now we're good friends. Whenever I see him at an event, we take pictures where I'm crying and he's pointing at me, holding his nose. But a lot of people like that show. I really have big fans of that show.
Yeah.
But so then I got into e-commerce and built sites for people, and I did pretty good. And then I got into Shopify, which is a very wonderful platform.
Yep.
So that's what I do for. I don't do a lot of them anymore. I just do for those who pay me a lot of money. So, but I
understandable.
If you got it like that, by now they should be, right? Jeez.
Right, exactly.
Yeah, and some of them heard of He-Man and Fat Albert and all these shows, and Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventures and all these crazy things. So that's where. So then I told you that I would do puppet shows when I was a kid. Did I tell you that? That was in my notes. But I did. My mother would make little curtains for my little puppet stages, and I would do puppet shows. So my next project, believe it or not, is going to be a puppet show that will be on the internet. Oh, cool. And I did a version of it years ago, and I said, I'm going to do it again. I'm sure I'll make a fool out of myself. But you know something? You do what you want to do. And I'm going to do this show, and I'm sure I'm going to get, with all the bullying that's going on the internet, I'm sure I'm going to be insulted down to, to my underwear because of they're going to say what a jerk and what a stupid show. But
you see some of the other stuff they put out there.
Hey, if it makes you happy, right?
Yeah, that's all that matters. Do something that you enjoy.
You got 3 fans right here,
so
you got 3 fans already. So.
Right.
Absolutely. Yeah, I'll definitely be watching it. for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what for
Absolutely.
me. Because I don't. So I'm getting this green screen is part. Can you see my green
Cool.
screen at all?
Yeah.
I see the
Yeah.
picture of
So
that.
the green screen. That's what started it, and I have the puppets are being built,
That's
and I'm
awesome.
getting my.
When
better
are you
lighting that I
looking,
have right now.
when are you thinking that's gonna happen and you're gonna release it then?
It'll be should be another month or two at least. And I
Okay.
don't know if this is a problem with the Writers Guild strikes, so I got to be a little
Oh.
careful when I
Sure.
Right.
do it.
Right,
But
right.
it may not, because this is YouTube, but I'm
Yeah.
sure they're on the strike list, so I'm not quite sure. So
Mhm.
we'll see.
Yeah.
I got to make sure I'm not going against the rules, or they'll take away all my Emmys and all my.
Well, wouldn't that be
Right,
something?
they don't need that.
After all these years, you're brought down by a puppet show. Jesus, you know what?
Yeah, doing a puppet show.
Yeah.
So
That's it.
I really can't wait, because I had fun doing it before, but now I'm going to do it a little different way,
Right.
fast
Yeah.
paced, and
That's
the way
Nice.
it's being done
Sounds
now.
awesome.
Yeah, and so that's
That
Well,
sounds
so
great.
that's it.
yeah,
I think I covered everything.
Yeah.
We'll
I'm
keep
so
an eye
happy
out.
I
you-
worked for Sid and Marty Croft, you know,
Yes.
Yes.
Oh my goodness. Yeah.
for versions
Land
of their
of the Lost.
shows.
Yeah. All their
I
stuff.
had a long run
Yeah,
with them.
they had a lot of
Yeah.
shows out. Yeah.
HR Puff and stuff.
They
Yeah.
did.
Sigmund and the Sea
Yeah.
Monsters.
Yeah.
Yeah. There's a lot of those.
Yeah.
Tons of
yeah.
stuff.
I did versions of those shows, and it was really fun too. So what
I
a
can
crazy
imagine.
career I've had.
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
I never planned it. I never thought about it, what I was doing. It was just one thing after another. Now I
And it
look
worked
back
out.
and here I am on this podcast trying
Yeah.
to explain myself.
Well,
Yeah.
But well,
Explain yourself.
Sometimes
are we
often called a
finished, or do
puppet
you-
show too. Yeah. We're kind of like a puppet show.
yeah,
Yeah.
no, I mean, I
Yeah.
appreciate you giving us all the time you did.
Yeah.
It was,
Yeah. Oh, it was
I mean,
fantastic.
Yeah. How many hours has it been so far?
you said-
Or 5, but we've got
About
lots
an
of
hour.
time.
Right, just fine.
Yeah. But is there anything else you want to know? I can't imagine what else I could blab about.
Yeah. I mean,
Rowby,
I-
I did. You said you had your top 10 great jokes for Laugh-In. Do you have one of them? Do you
Yes.
remember, what was the top one that you?
You know, it's weird. I wish I knew which ones they were. I do have the actual notebook. I typed all these things in. I know one of them was one of these little things that went across the bottom of the screen. Lenin's grave is a communist plot. And
that's good.
And
Oh,
another
that's
one
awesome.
was Curb. Another one that went across the bottom of the screen was Curb Lassie. Now I have other jokes check marked in that notebook, which I still have, but they don't seem that funny. So I don't know which ones the other ones were, and I don't know whether George
Hey, they were
Slaughter
good enough
has
to get you on that show.
Right.
Yeah, it was amazing to go in there. You know,
Yeah.
who would be in the hallway. Wanting to do the show. I remember walking down the hallway. There was Jack Benny getting his makeup on, and he was really a hero to me.
Yeah.
I should mention that as a younger, or during that same period, I became friends with Stan Laurel. I met him in his
Really?
apartment in Santa Monica,
Wow.
and so I met him a few times. And I went to his funeral. In fact, if you go to YouTube and type in Rowby Stan Laurel's funeral, you'll see a little clip of that event, and you'll see a very young version of me heading into the
Yeah. That's cool.
church. So had all these interests. Always comedy, though, for the most part. Occasionally, I'll get suckered into I did a Heart to Heart. Which
Yeah,
guess was
I was gonna
kind
ask
of
you
a
about Heart to
drama,
Heart.
But
Yeah, love that show.
Yeah, I
but it
used to
was
love it.
really a lot of people love it. I thought it was rather oddball. I mean, that
I
dog
think that's why I
was
love it.
no Asta. You know, that dog just looked at the camera.
Yeah.
But it was a popular show,
Mhm.
and I went to the stage. Oh, so I go to the stage while they're shooting my episode of Heart to Heart. It was A Christmas Heart, and they were shooting a birthday party scene because Christmas scene.
Mhm.
And I went up to Robert Wagner and I said, you know, my mother always said I look just like you, and because of course he was when he was younger, he was
Right.
very handsome.
Right.
And really handsome. If you look at some of his younger pictures, he just looked at me and laughed, you know. But I told him that.
That's awesome.
So all these crazy experiences, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's definitely
And,
a wonderful career, and a career that everybody knows, but they may not know the person behind that. So
Right,
I do
right.
definitely appreciate you coming on and sharing those
Absolutely.
well,
stories with
yeah,
us.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. It's
Yeah.
great.
I'm just another of many writers out there, and many comedy writers out there. And there's some wonderful writers I know who, believe me, were far better than me. I mean, Arnie Cogan was a hilarious writer. He wrote on Carol Burnett. Gene Parrott, and who I was his partner for a while, and he got on the Carol Burnett show. And I learned from everybody. And but people don't think about the writers for the most part. And we're an interesting group of people. Anyway, so there it is. I guess that's it for today. I'm sorry my pictures didn't work.
Oh, it's okay.
Oh,
I mean,
no,
the
my
stories
God,
painted
yeah.
a wonderful picture.
Literally,
regardless.
yeah.
So,
You know,
so wonderful.
I would hope at some point we could have you back.
Absolutely.
You know,
I'm sure there's
Well,
more.
yeah. I'll have the pictures working now.
Yeah.
there we
Right, a
go.
lot
There we
more
go.
to
Great.
There we go.
We'll do a picture show
There
version.
you-
I love it.
We'll do, and we'll put your jokes across the bottom. So
We'll
that'll be
put your-
Yeah. Yes. Right.
awesome.
What
Well,
an amazing thing.
Roby, thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yes, thank you,
Appreciate
sir.
it so much. But yes, and we'll
I
definitely
had
be
a lot of
in touch.
fun.
As did we.
Thanks a lot. So I guess we're going to end this thing now, right?
Yeah, sir.
We're wrapping up, yeah.
Let's talk some more. You know, when I go to the doctor's office, I'm telling jokes to them. When I see a nurse, I say, they're having a sale of downstairs in the cafeteria. They're having a special on what is it, of liver and appendix, grilled appendix and onion. So all the nurses laugh at that. When they're giving me a blood test, I say, did you go to school to learn this, or did you just Google it before I came in? So they heard all my jokes, and they put up with me. So now it's the Uber drivers and the Lyft drivers who are my audience.
Very good.
And now you guys.
Hey, wherever you can
Thanks
get
a
the
lot,
jokes out.
everybody.
Thank you so
Thank
much.
you.
Thank
Roby,
you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Have fun. Bye.
Bye-bye.